In a world where wealth and power often overshadow love and kindness, one unexpected arrival changed everything in a mansion where hope seemed lost. No one could have predicted that the quiet new maid would unlock a miracle hidden in plain sight, and nothing would ever be the same again. The mansion stood like a monument to power, its marble pillars gleaming in the sunlight, its golden chandeliers dripping with opulence, and its endless hallways echoing with silence. From the outside, it was a dream, the kind of estate that whispered of wealth, success, and influence. But within those towering walls lingered a sorrow so deep that no amount of luxury could mask it. Behind the polished doors and velvet curtains lived the millionaire and his twins, heirs to a vast fortune, children whose very existence had become a source of whispered pity. Born with eyes that never met another's gaze, they were known as the blind children of the house, and though they breathed, laughed faintly, and wandered timidly through the corridors, they were treated more as shadows than as heirs. The millionaire. Himself, a man whose name commanded respect in every boardroom and whose face graced financial magazines, was strangely absent in the heart of his own home. He had built empires, crushed rivals, and collected treasures from every corner of the world. But when it came to his children, he shrank from the truth. He buried himself in work, surrounding his soul with ledgers and contracts, and hosted banquets, where he smiled for cameras while quietly dreading the moment anyone would ask about the twins. For him, their condition was a wound he could not bear to look at, so he simply didn't. Instead, he left them to the care of servants, never questioning whether they were nurtured or merely maintained. The staff in the mansion treated the twins with a cold pity that disguised itself as care. They fed them, dressed them, and guided them when necessary. But they spoke of them in hushed tones, as if their very existence carried a curse. Some believed the children had brought misfortune into the house, others simply considered them hopeless, cases destined to live in darkness forever. Their laughter, when it slipped out soft and fragile, was often met with silence or a dismissive glance. No one attempted to truly reach them, for it was easier to assume their lives were already written in tragedy. Into this world of gilded sorrow stepped the new maid, a woman unlike the others. She arrived without fanfare, her footsteps steady, her gaze calm, her presence quiet yet commanding in a way that unsettled the routine of the household. Unlike the rest, she did not look at the mansion with envy or awe, nor did she shrink from the weight of its sadness. She carried herself with quiet strength, the kind born not of privilege but of resilience. While others whispered warnings about the children, she listened politely but remained untouched by their words. When she was finally introduced to the twins, she did not flinch, nor did she cast them the pitying glances they had grown so used to. Instead, she greeted them with warmth, her voice low and gentle, as though she saw something in them that no one else had dared to see. The twins, so used to the indifference of those around them, reacted differently to her presence, though their eyes did not rise to meet hers, their heads tilted at the sound of her footsteps. Their hands, usually limp when guided, reached faintly toward her voice. There was something in the tone of her words, something in the steadiness of her breath, that stirred a curiosity long buried beneath neglect. For years they had remained silent figures in the mansion, but at the sound of her laughter, faint smiles began to flicker across their lips, tentative, like tiny sparks in the dark. The staff noticed, and not all were pleased. Some muttered that her kindness was foolish, a waste of time on children who could not change. Others worried she would disrupt the fragile order of the house, where silence had long been the safest choice. The mansion was built on appearances, and appearances demanded that the twins remain hidden, a quiet reminder of fate's cruelty. The maid's warmth was dangerous. It suggested possibility where there was meant to be only resignation. The millionaire. Himself remained oblivious, buried in his work, rarely noticing the subtle shifts in his home. Yet something unspoken had begun. The air in the halls, once heavy with despair, seemed to carry a new rhythm when she passed. The twins, once shadows, now leaned toward her voice as though drawn by an unseen light. But beneath this fragile beginning, tension simmered. The household was not a place that welcomed outsiders, especially those who dared to see hope where others saw only misfortune. The whispers grew sharper, the staff exchanged wary glances, and though no one dared confront her outright, the maid could feel the weight of their disapproval pressing against her every move. Still, she did not waver. She did not come to the mansion to be accepted. She had come to serve, and in serving, she had found two souls waiting quietly for someone to believe in them. And so, in the silence of the mansion, where wealth towered but love lay forgotten, a quiet storm had begun. No one knew it yet, not the millionaire, not the staff, not even the children themselves, but everything was about to change. The days in the mansion began to shift in ways so subtle that few noticed at first. The new maid did not accept the silence that clung to the children like a shroud. Instead of leaving them to sit idly in their rooms, she brought them into small corners of light. She would kneel beside them and clap softly, her palms striking with a rhythm that carried through the stillness. At first, the twins remained unmoved, their faces blank, but then their heads tilted slightly as though their ears had caught a new sound. She began to hum melodies, slow and gentle, filling the emptiness of the halls with a voice that carried warmth. The sound seemed to weave through the air like threads of comfort, and little by little the children began to respond. Their fingers twitched, their lips curved into faint smiles, and their laughter, soft and unsure, broke through like sunlight peeking through clouds. She brought them textures, guiding their hands across rough wood, smooth marble, and soft fabric. She placed flowers in their palms so they could feel the delicate petals, and once she set a feather in their hands, watching them giggle as it brushed against their skin. What others had dismissed as lifeless children began to awaken under her patient touch. She treated them not as burdens, but as souls waiting to discover the world in their own way. Every sound, every rhythm, every texture became a key she used to unlock something hidden inside them. But the household staff did not share her hope. They whispered in the kitchens and corridors, mocking her persistence. Some called her foolish, others cruel for giving the children a taste of what they could never truly have. They told her she was wasting her energy, and they warned her that the master of the house would never tolerate being teased with illusions. "Do not stir dreams where there can only be darkness," one muttered bitterly. Their words were laced with fear as much as contempt, for they knew the millionaire had no patience for hope. Hope was something he had long buried. The maid did not argue with them. She carried on quietly, her heart steady in its belief that the children deserved more than pity. She knew the staff watched her with suspicion, but she also knew the twins were changing. Their smiles grew quicker, their laughter brighter, and their hands reached out eagerly when she entered a room. They began to listen for her footsteps, to turn toward her voice as if drawn by a magnet. For the first time, they seemed alive with curiosity. The millionaire, busy with his endless meetings and social appearances, noticed fragments of this transformation. Once, he saw one of the twins clutching at the maid's hand and laughing, a sound he had not heard in years. Another time, he caught them raising their heads toward a song she sang. For a moment, his hardened heart trembled, but he quickly dismissed it. Coincidence, he told himself. Children could smile at shadows, laugh at nonsense. He could not allow himself to believe there was more, for belief had betrayed him too many times before. Then came the moment that changed everything for the maid. One afternoon, She drew the curtains just slightly to let the golden light of the sun spill into the room. She noticed the twins' faces turn toward it. Their eyes, though unfocused, seemed to follow the brightness, flickering as though they recognized something. Her breath caught. Gently, she held up a glowing lantern and moved it slowly across the space. To her astonishment, the children's eyes tracked the movement. It was not perfect, but it was undeniable. They were not completely blind. Their sight, dulled and neglected, had been starved of stimulation. No one had ever bothered to try. Her heart raced with the revelation. For years, the children had been written off as hopeless, their futures sealed in sorrow. Yet here, before her eyes, was proof that they had been misunderstood. They were not lost, only hidden beneath layers of neglect. The thought filled her with both joy and sorrow, joy that there was possibility, sorrow that so much time had already been wasted. She wanted to cry out, to tell the millionaire at once, but she held herself back. His heart was shielded by years of disappointment, and she knew that if she rushed forward, he would reject her discovery as fantasy. Worse, he might banish her from the mansion altogether. The staff, too, would turn their scorn into venom if they sensed she was challenging the truth they had accepted for so long. So she remained silent, carrying the secret within her like a fragile flame that could be snuffed out by the faintest wind. Yet from that day onward, every time she worked with the children, her resolve deepened. She whispered stories to them, painting pictures with words, guiding their hands as though shaping the world they had been denied. Their laughter grew louder, their steps bolder, their eyes brighter. They were awakening, piece by piece, and she was determined to protect the fragile light she had discovered. The mansion, still cloaked in its grandeur, had no idea that its shadows were about to break. The night of the grand event arrived, and the mansion came alive with music, laughter, and the glittering presence of the wealthy elite. The chandeliers blazed with golden light, servants rushed about carrying trays of crystal glasses and silver platters, and the millionaire stood tall, hosting with the charm expected of a man of his stature. Guests marveled at the wealth on display. The priceless paintings, the marble floors, the gardens lit like a dream. But behind the spectacle lay a truth the host refused to share. The twins, as always, were hidden away, kept from sight to ensure no one whispered about their blindness or the tragedy of his legacy. They were tucked into their rooms like secrets best forgotten, while the world admired their father's power. The maid, however, could not bear it. She had watched for weeks as the children bloomed under her care, their laughter returning, their eyes flickering toward light. To her, they were not burdens nor blemishes. They were children alive with potential, and yet once again, they were locked away, silenced so that strangers could drink champagne without discomfort. As the sounds of violins floated through the air, she slipped into their room and found them sitting quietly, their faces turned toward the muffled music. Her heart ached. She knew it was not her place, but she could no longer accept the injustice. Guiding their small hands in hers, she whispered softly and led them out, away from the noise of the ballroom. Step by step, she carried them into the garden where the night stretched vast and still. The moon hung above, silver and glowing, its light spilling across the flowers and fountains. She crouched beside them, her voice gentle, urging them to lift their faces. Slowly, they did. And for the first time, their eyes shimmered with recognition. They blinked rapidly, following the flickers of moonlight through the leaves. Their hands reached out toward the glow, grasping at something they could feel even if not fully see. One child let out a laugh so pure and unrestrained that it cut through the night like a bell. Tears pricked her eyes as she watched. This was no illusion. This was awakening. These children, long dismissed as blind shadows, were reaching for light. She clapped softly, hummed a tune, and watched them respond, their bodies alive with joy. It was a moment so tender, so miraculous, she almost forgot the danger of what she had done. But danger found her quickly. A voice thundered across the garden, deep and furious. The millionaire had been making rounds among his guests when he noticed the children missing, and his search led him to this scene. His face hardened with rage, his voice laced with humiliation as he demanded to know what she was doing. He accused her of overstepping her role, of making a spectacle out of his children, of trying to humiliate him in front of the entire city. His words struck like whips, and the staff who followed him stood in the shadows, smirking in triumph. The maid did not flinch. Though her heart pounded, she stood her ground, shielding the children as they clung to her. She tried to explain, her voice steady, telling him that the twins had responded to light, that they were not as blind as everyone believed. But he would not hear it. His pride had been wounded, and he could not bear the thought of someone challenging the truth he had clung to for years. He ordered her to leave at once, to pack her things, and never step foot in his house again. The children whimpered, their hands reaching toward her, but she knew there was no pleading with him in that moment. Yet before she turned away, she spoke one final truth. With quiet defiance, she told him that his children were not hopeless, that they had always needed someone to see them first. Her words hung in the night air, heavy and unshakable, before she walked back into the shadows of the mansion. That night, the house seemed colder, the music of the event long gone, leaving only silence behind. The millionaire sat in his study, brooding, convinced he had done the right thing, convincing himself she had filled his children with dangerous illusions. Yet he could not shake the sound of their laughter, the sight of them reaching toward the night sky. He poured himself a drink, but even that did not drown the memory. It was then that he heard a faint sound in the hallway, soft footsteps, and the distant tune of a music box. He turned sharply, surprised, and saw the twins stumble into the room, guided by the melody. They moved clumsily, but with purpose, their faces glowing in the light of the fireplace. And then he saw it, their eyes wide and uncertain, following the flickering flames. His glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. For the first time in years, he froze, staring not at tragedy but at possibility. His heart clenched, with something he had buried long ago: guilt. How many years had he ignored them? How many chances had he denied them because he was too afraid of disappointment? The maid's words echoed in his mind, sharp and undeniable. They only needed someone to see them first. And now, standing before him in the glow of the fire, his children had proven her right. The following morning, the mansion felt different. The echoes of the night before lingered in the millionaire's mind, haunting him with every step. He had seen his children turn toward the fire, their eyes following the light with a determination that could not be denied. The truth he had tried to bury had risen before him, undeniable and raw. For years he had called them blind, had hidden them away as if they were burdens, when all along perhaps it was he who had been blind. Blinded by pride, by fear, by his obsession with reputation. That realization cut deeper than any insult he had ever endured in business. He could not push it aside anymore. Summoning his courage, he asked to see the maid. When she entered, her posture steady, her gaze calm as ever, he did not meet her eyes right away. He, the man who had once ruled boardrooms with his presence, now found himself struggling to speak in the quiet of his own study. Finally, he confessed what he had witnessed, his voice rough with something unfamiliar: humility. He admitted that she had been right, that the children had responded, that there was hope he had been too afraid to acknowledge. He did not command her this time. Instead, he asked her, almost pleaded, to stay and continue working with the twins. For the first time, his authority gave way to vulnerability. She accepted, not with triumph, but with quiet grace. And so began a new chapter in the mansion. Day by day, the maid guided the children further into the world that had been denied to them. She brought them out into the gardens at dawn to feel the warmth of the sun on their faces. She lit lanterns in the evening and taught them to follow the glow. She clapped and sang, and the children laughed louder than ever before, their eyes beginning to brighten, their steps gaining strength. Slowly, their vision sharpened. Not perfect, but enough to see outlines, movement, and eventually, the faces of those who stood closest to them. Each milestone was celebrated not with pity, but with joy. The staff who once mocked her efforts began to fall silent. They watched the twins stumble less, laugh more, and reach confidently toward the light. They saw how the maid's persistence, once ridiculed, had become the miracle that transformed the mansion. Whispers of scorn turned into whispers of awe. Some even began to help her, drawn by the quiet power of her belief. The house that had once been heavy with despair now echoed with the sound of children's footsteps, with music, with life. The golden halls no longer felt like prisons of wealth. They had become a home. The greatest change, however, was not in the children, but in their father. The millionaire who had once lived for appearances now spent his evenings sitting with his children, holding their hands and listening to their laughter. He traded late-night meetings for bedtime stories, boardroom deals for afternoons in the garden. He had built empires out of steel and glass, but now he was building something he had nearly lost forever: a family. The walls he had built around, his heart crumbled as he allowed himself to feel the weight of his mistakes and the relief of redemption. One evening, as the maid guided the children across the great hall, the millionaire stopped her. His voice carried none of the pride or arrogance that had once defined him. He thanked her, not as a master thanking a servant, but as a father thanking the woman who had restored his children's lives and, in turn, restored his own. He admitted that all his riches, all his power, had never given him what her courage and compassion had. She had given him the gift of truly seeing his children for the first time, and with it, the gift of love. The closing scene of their story unfolded quietly, without fanfare, but with a beauty that no banquet or fortune could rival. The twins, once hidden away in darkness, now walked hand in hand across the garden path, their steps steady, their eyes shimmering with newfound light. They were not led by pity, nor bound by shame, but guided by strength, courage, and hope. The millionaire walked behind them, not as a figure of distant power, but as a father who had finally learned to cherish. And beside the children stood the maid, not as a servant in uniform, but as the heart of the family, the one who had restored their vision, both in sight and in spirit, and had taught them all that true wealth was never measured in gold, but in love.